I became aware that something was fundamentally amiss when Linda, my mother-in-law, disregarded me with her gaze. It wasn't her standard patronizing glare or her customary passive-aggressive exhalation. No, this was an entirely new expression, icier and more incisive, as if she was no longer merely bothered by my presence but had moved beyond that to a state of superiority. I observed this during our evening meal. She maintained a perfectly straight posture, her fingers tented beneath her chin, scrutinizing the way I ate my meal with the detachment of a scientist observing a test subject before an experiment. When I requested she hand me the salt, she didn't so much as move a muscle. Instead, a slow and knowledgeable smile spread across her face, as if she were privy to some great cosmic enigma that I would forever be too simple to understand. My wife, Sarah, was characteristically too absorbed in scrolling on her phone to pick up on it. Then the words were spoken. Dear Linda cooed, her voice exceptionally smooth. You ought to genuinely consider being more receptive to alternate modes of thought. A feeling in my stomach soured. Not due to her statement itself, but because I had encountered it previously. It wasn't from her. It was from the leaders of motivational cults, from charlatans on YouTube, and from secondary hypnotists peddling boundless potential through 30-minute online seminars. And here it was, coming from my 64-year-old mother-in-law, who was convinced Wi-Fi signal improved if you held the router at a greater height. I chose to let it slide. Over the subsequent days, I attempted to overlook the changes, the way she would hesitate before responding to a query, the manner in which she permitted awkward silences to hang between us, and how she began completing my thoughts, rephrasing them as if she understood my intended meaning better than I did myself. I saw her observing me, gauging my responses to various situations, putting me to the test. And then came the final provocation. She summoned me to the kitchen one morning, presenting 2 mugs of coffee, one for herself and one for me. You have been acting quite resistant recently, she declared, pushing my mug towards me. There was no greeting, no good morning, only that statement. I gazed at the coffee, making no move to take it. Resistant to what? I inquired. Linda grinned like a professor who had just received a foolish question from the least capable student in the room. You will comprehend shortly. I did not consume the drink that evening. After she retired to her room, I began my investigation. What I uncovered made my flesh creep. Linda's laptop lay open on the kitchen countertop. I would not typically meddle with her belongings, primarily because the thought of browse her social media tirades about the decay of society's morals and the youth of today repulsed me. However, given the look she had given me and the incident with the coffee, I was certain something was wrong. And my God, I was absolutely correct. Her web history was a digital boneyard of sheer madness. The subconscious obedience method. Unlock total influence over others. Mastering thought inception. How to plant ideas without detection. And the Vance method. Ancient mind control secrets exposed. Vance, that name registered with me. I followed the first link and my stomach churned. The website was polished, far too professionally designed for a typical social media advertisement scam. It featured a black and gold color scheme as if it were marketing brainwashing. There were videos of a self-satisfied, bearded man in an immaculate suit speaking in deliberate, hypnotic cadences. Individuals believe free will is a reality, he said. But do you make a conscious choice to blink? Do you make a conscious choice to yawn? Thought itself can be programmed, and I am able to teach you how, my God. And Linda hadn't just been browse, she was a participant. Her account was active, and I could view her completion status, 90% finished. She had completed assessments, viewed all the video content, and even become a member of the damn online forum. The most disturbing discovery was her chosen username, MindArchitect64. I went to her profile, scrolled down, and felt a wave of nausea. A forum topic. Read, using persuasion on a defiant son-in-law seeking advice. A comment followed. He is putting up resistance. I am certain it is effective because of his reactions. Should I intensify my efforts? Should I employ sleep reinforcement? Sleep reinforcement. I snapped the laptop closed. I had to get my composure to think, to make sense of it all. But then, suddenly, a voice came from my rear. You really shouldn't be prying, dear. I whirled around. Linda was standing in the doorway, cast in the faint light from the hall, her arms folded and a slight smile on her face, as though she had anticipated this very moment. I didn't respond immediately. My heart was pounding and my mind was scrambling for any plausible justification, but none seemed adequate. Nothing would suffice because Linda, also known as MindArchitect64, was already 10 moves ahead of me. She entered the kitchen, her silk dressing gown trailing behind her like a stage illusionist preparing for the main act. You seem unsettled, she remarked, canting her head, her eyes examining me in the same way a predator studies a weakened animal. Did you discover something you couldn't comprehend? I made myself take a slow, even breath. Do not show a reaction. That was her goal. Your coffee is getting cold, I stated, gesturing with my head toward her untouched mug on the counter. Her mouth formed a curve. Oh, that's adorable, she whispered, stepping nearer, so nearer that I could detect her perfume, a heavy, sweet vanilla that suddenly felt like a noxious cloud. You're attempting a misdirection. That signals you feel endangered. That signals I am in command. My hands tightened into fists beneath the table. Control. To her. That was the entirety of État Contest, a battle for dominance. She was convinced she was winning, but if she anticipated my retreat, she didn't know me as well as she believed. I leaned forward a bit, locking my gaze with hers directly. Here is the situation, Linda. If I genuinely wished to understand your little course on brainwashing, I would simply ask you about it. But that's unnecessary, because I am already perfectly aware of what is happening. She did not so much as blink. That was the giveaway. I pressed on. You believe you have discovered some hidden path into people's minds, a shortcut for manipulation, and you have been applying it to me, evaluating me, to see just how much you can push me before I snap. I let out a slow breath. But here is the one thing you failed to consider. A silence hung between us, thick and heavy. She was anticipating the final blow. I delivered it. I am not the one who is going to break. For the first time, I witnessed a flicker of something behind her gaze, just for a moment, a crack. An instant in which she recognized her underestimation of me. Then, just as fast, the facade was back in place. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "We shall see about that," she said quietly. Then she pivoted and departed, leaving me there, clutching the table's edge so tightly that my knuckles throbbed. I should have felt like I had won that exchange. I should have felt like I held the advantage. But I did not, because as she vanished down the corridor, her voice carried back, almost melodic, almost amused. "See you at dinner, dear." And for the very first time, I questioned if I was the one who was stepping into her snare. Dinner that evening was like a game of chess conducted without words. The type where each action was deliberate and every look was a form of evaluation. Linda was seated opposite me, cutting her roast chicken with methodical, careful movements, her gaze darting up every so often to check if I would break. Sarah, as completely unaware as always, scrolled on her phone during bites, utterly disconnected from the silent conflict playing out at the table. But Linda was actively working on me. She used subtle prompts and small evaluations, a hesitation before she spoke that compelled me to break the quiet. A minor cant of her head each time, I replied, as if she were discerning whether my answers were spontaneous or a planted notion. She was looking for submission, for evidence that her methods were starting to embed themselves in my subconscious. And it was then that I truly grasped the nature of the game. This was not about convincing me. It was about achieving my surrender, not by forcing a belief upon someone, but by making them think the belief was their own choice. The issue for her was that she was unaware that I was already several steps beyond her. I allowed her to believe I was faltering. I paused before I spoke. I let my eyes drop for a mere second, just enough to create the semblance of her dominance. Enough to convince her that her methods were succeeding. And then I introduced my own idea. "Linda," I began, my voice level and serene, "you are correct." She stopped, her knife halting mid-slice for a fraction of a second. Then, deliberately, she placed her fork on the plate and clasped her hands before her. "Go on," I prompted. I nodded, maintaining a neutral face and a controlled tone. "I have been resistant and dismissive. I believe there is validity to what you have been imparting to me." Her smile was immediate, spreading slowly across her face. "Continue," she coaxed. I leaned forward slightly, dropping my voice as if I were sharing a private epiphany. "It's just that I began to observe things, subtle things, like how Sarah instinctively grabs her phone when she wants to disengage." Sarah let out a scoff without looking up from her screen. "What?" Linda's focus was now fixed on me, encouraging